One, two, one, two, three.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having a spectacular day. She got a haircut. She is chopped and fresh, and we are ready to do our talk back or our discussion for our Harry Potter reread series on book number 5. Today we're going to be talking about Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This one took me a little bit longer to get through because I think it's the chunkiest book, but we finished it. We're here. We're ready. I watched movie 5. We read book 5, and we are ready to discuss. But before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe because it'll really support my channel. I am repping my Hogwarts t-shirt from Loot Crate. Let's go ahead and talk about book 5. So the first thing that I want to say, and this actually relates to the movie, if you go back and you watch the movie, the opening credits, there's like an orb that transitions into the sun. And when I say orb, I mean like a prophecy orb that transitions into the sun that I've never seen before. I've watched these movies probably each more than 20 times, and I've never seen that before. So I love that. Let's talk about the book, shall we? I got my handy dandy notes here. Okay, so they got rid of a lot book to movie with this book. First things first being that Mundungus, who we don't meet until movie 6, or movie 7, was supposed to be watching Harry as part of the Order while he was home, and he was not. He left. The only thing that we got in the movie was Mrs. Fig, who ended up seeing and watching over Harry, and she actually was supposed to get really mad at Mundungus for leaving. So we have that whole introduction in the book that I forgot about. Also, what we didn't see in the movie that was included in the book, and we actually learn a lot more about this in the book than we do in any of the movies, is Neville and his parents. In the book, Harry sees Bellatrix Lestrange confess to torturing Neville's parents, and she gets sent to Azkaban. So we actually meet Bellatrix before she escapes, which I thought was really interesting and I completely forgot about. I think in the books, this book in particular, there's a lot of character development that we miss out in the movies. There's a lot of backstory for Bellatrix. There's a lot of backstory for Neville that we miss out on. There's a lot of backstory for Cho Chang that we miss out on. That's all included in the books. Something else that I thought was really funny was when they go to the Order, when they go to Sirius Black's house, they like clean the whole thing, and Mrs. Weasley's like, we have to clean this house, and they actually spend a couple days there. But in the movie, we sort of just like blow right to Hogwarts, which I get. We want to see Hogwarts a lot, but there's a lot of storytelling that goes on while they're at the house in the beginning, where Harry learns a lot of information. Again, character development. Mrs. Weasley's Bogart is seeing her children and her husband dead, which it gets repeated a couple of times in the book, especially when Arthur gets attacked by that snake, which I think is so important. You know, realizing people's worst fears, I think it's so important. Another character that we didn't meet in the movies was Hagrid's replacement. So Hagrid actually doesn't come to teach until the middle of the term. So there's another teacher that's teaching care of magical creatures. Again, something that I think that the movies completely missed out on altogether, and I want to say all the movies thus far, is the importance of school. I know that it was important of action and like Voldemort coming and the threat of Voldemort, but book 5 is all about their owl exams, and like, yeah, we have like that one class where they're talking about owls, and we show them taking the exam and Fred and George do the firecrackers, but there really is no like emphasis on them studying at all, which I think is really funny because that's what the point of school was. Instead, the movie focused more about Dumbledore's army, which I think is also important. You know, that's a big part of the book, but they like really forget about school and learning all these charms. It's almost like they just like already knew all the charms, and you don't see them learning any charm besides like Wingardium Leviosa. Something else that was really interesting that they flipped in the movies was that Hermione is really mean and judgmental of Luna Lovegood. In the book, she's like really mean and angry and judgmental, but in the movie, Hermione is very like, this is Luna, and Luna's sort of just like part of their group from the start, and she's not. She's really an outcast, even more in the books than she is in the movie. Another thing, I think they really portrayed Umbridge well in the movies, like to a T, the character description of what she is. But I think that they took out the storyline of her trying to destroy Harry as her main goal. Instead, they made her main goal changing the way that the school was run, but really her main goal was trying to catch Harry doing anything. And one of those things is she almost catches Sirius Black in the fire when they're talking in the Gryffindor common room. which I think is really important. It shows that she's like out to get Harry, as opposed to trying to fix and like fire all these teachers, which was her job as well, but her main focus was Harry. Another thing that they completely left out, like I said in book 4 with Dobby and Winky, they left out Dobby, and Dobby's the one that tells Harry about the Room of Requirement. And instead in the movie, Neville happens upon this room. And I want to know why, like if they already had him made up in CGI, like why not add him in? I don't know. I think it would have just made Dobby's death in the movie so much more dramatic if he was included in every movie. So that's more of a question for like when they decide what they want to cut out. I want to know why they decided to take Dobby out of all of these scenes. Particularly, we talked about this in book 4. Oh, this was just really funny, and I forget about these little like one-liners that J.K. Rowling's really good at. Fred and Harry get into a fight with Malfoy because Malfoy is talking smack about the Weasleys' parents, and they get into like a fist fight altercation, and they call it Muggle dueling. Because, you know, wizards would duel with their wands, but Harry and Fred were, like, getting to a fist fight, and I just thought that it was just funny. Like, Muggle dueling, I don't know, those kind of things just, like, really make me laugh, and it really, like, brings you into the perspective of the wizarding world. Related to that Muggle dueling, Umbridge bans Fred and Harry from Quidditch. So I think we sort of, like, go away from Quidditch for movie 5. It's more all about the kids learning defensive spells in their, the Room of Requirement, as opposed to, I don't think we see a Quidditch game in movie 5. But there is, and they actually get banned, and Umbridge takes their broomsticks away, which of course is devastating to Harry. The one thing that he loves more than anything is Quidditch. Another thing that they sort of, I get why they got rid of this, because I know that they wanted to spark the love story between Ron and Hermione, but Hermione writes to Victor Krum a lot in this book, and Ron starts to get really jealous, and that she's got this pen pal and still is connecting with Victor Krum, which I thought was really interesting. And I wonder, like, is she doing it to make Ron jealous? Or, you know, I just think it's kind of fun to add to the Ron and Hermione relationship. Oh, another thing, I feel like we make the assumption, but they don't show it. So when Harry has the dream about Mr. Weasley, there's a lot more information that goes into what Dumbledore is learning about Harry's connection with Voldemort. And Dumbledore actually gives them a portkey to head to Grimmauld Place without Umbridge's permission to go help Mr. Weasley. And then there's the whole chapter and scene where they're at the hospital and they end up meeting Neville's parents. And I honestly like completely forgot that Neville's parents aren't dead. They're just, they were tortured into madness and now they're stuck at the hospital, living at the hospital, which is why Neville lives with his grandmother. But I feel like that's so important, and we don't really, I mean, I know that they wanted to make it more about the trio, but it's funny, like Neville is a much more important character in the books than they portray him to be in the movies. You learn a lot more about his backstory, especially with the prophecy, which I'll talk about later, but you know, Neville's actually a really important part of this book. So it's sad. And even like Harry and Neville have a scene where he talks about his parents. He never says that they're dead, but I don't know, I just feel like it would have been like a one-liner to just give a little bit more insight into Neville's experience. Because if you didn't read the books, you would just assume that his parents are dead and that Bellatrix killed them. This is just more of a timeline thing, but Harry and Snape start their lessons right after the dream at Hogwarts. But actually, we missed out on the whole scene where they go home to the hospital and Snape comes to the Order of the Phoenix headquarters and tells Harry that he's going to study occlumency. So we sort of lose that and the connection between Snape and Sirius. They have a fight at Grimmauld Place, and so you get the like history and the backstory between Sirius and Snape, which I think would have added to the relationship of Sirius and Harry. Another thing that we completely got rid of, which I get, you know, there's only so much you can do in the movies, but Harry asks Cho out for Valentine's Day. They go out and have their little Valentine's Day date, and he actually has to go meet Hermione, and Cho gets upset, and it's a whole thing, and he doesn't understand how, like, female brains work, and Hermione was like, well, of course she'd be upset if you were coming to see me. You shouldn't have told her that. You should have told her that you didn't want to come see me, but she forced you or something. I don't know. We lose out on the, like, teenagers, like, discovering how to date and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, we do get their first kiss on screen together, but the drama associated with teen dating, I feel like we lost out on a little bit. Again, we lose Dobby. So Dobby's the one that warns the Dumbledore's army that Umbridge has found out, and it ends up being Cho Chang's friend that was tortured and gave it up, as opposed to Cho herself. But you know, if there's one change, I do like that they made Cho the victim, and she was the one that was tortured. I liked that change. I thought that that was a good change. Another thing, again, character development. So when Harry does Protego, when Snape, it keeps going into his mind, and we see a snippet of Snape's past and Snape's memories. We see, you know, James and Sirius bullying him and pulling down his trousers and lifting him up on the tree. But what we didn't see is the scene with Lily, where Lily comes in to sort of save Snape, and Snape calls her a half-blood or a mudblood, and Lily says how much she hates James. So there's a lot of backstory about the elders, about the adults that we miss out on completely. And I think that it's informative for Harry, especially because then Harry wants to travel to go ask Sirius about that whole thing. So he travels back to Grimmauld Place to ask him if his dad was a good person, because all Harry knows are the stories that he's told. And obviously Snape really disliked James. So I think, you know, Harry, the biggest thing for Harry is discovering who he is and discovering who he can connect to in this book. This whole book, one of the themes is discovery for him. Something else that I thought was fun, we don't get this, we find the Weasley store in movie 6, but Fred and George blow everything up with their firecrackers, and then they fly off and they leave Hogwarts because they don't want to study here anymore, and they go and they open their shop, which I thought was really funny. I mean, I guess we sort of get that, but you don't get the, like, conversation of like, yeah, we're gonna go and start our shop now. But I thought that was so funny. I totally forgot about that scene in the book. Another thing that was different, Ron wasn't with them when Harry and Hagrid met Grop. Ron was actually playing Quidditch, which again, they sort of like got rid of Quidditch for this book or this movie. And so Harry and Hermione are the only two that Hagrid introduces Grop to. The other thing that we didn't discover, which I think would have been really important, is that Umbridge is the one that sent the Dementor to attack Harry at Four Privet Drive, which really gives you some insight into how the Ministry wanted to just shut him up and wanted him to like almost not be a wizard anymore. And I thought that that was so interesting, because I always had a question too of like why Umbridge switched sides. Like, she was all for the Minister of Magic and all for the rules and all for this and all for that, and then all of a sudden she switched. I mean, I'm in book 6, so maybe there'll be more information about that I can remember. But yeah, I just thought it was really interesting that that was left out and she didn't admit to that. The other thing too that I want to talk about, I thought it was really well done, the scene in the movie where they go to the Ministry to save Sirius. I mean, obviously the scale of the set is amazing, the prophecies, the battles, the CGI with the battles. But what was lacking from the movie that was in the book is that the kids actually got really hurt. And in the movie, it seems like they're fine. Like, they come and they like check on Harry while he's being tortured. But like Hermione was, I think she was like petrified, and Neville broke his leg, and there was like lots of damage done to these kids that's not done in the movies. Also, there's like all these different scenes with different doors and different departments, and they can't find the department. I mean, obviously, I know we don't have all the time in the world, but it would give you a sense of like how lost they were, and then they found the room, and then all of the Death Eaters come and basically attack them. Something else that is in the book that is not in the movie. Something else in the book that's not in the movie. In the movie, Harry hears the prophecy, but in the book, he doesn't hear the prophecy and he drops it. And what's interesting in J.K. Rowling's world, basically what they said is that prophecies can only be retrieved by the person that they're made about. So either Voldemort or Harry had to retrieve it. But in Harry's vision of Sirius being tortured, Voldemort's in the Ministry of Magic. So why couldn't he just get it if he was already there? They make a big thing in the book about, well, Voldemort can't just walk into the Ministry. He would be caught by all the Aurors. Like, there's no way he could get into the Ministry. And yet, and I don't know if they're supposed to say, like, Voldemort manipulated Harry's mind to think that Voldemort was in the Ministry of Magic, but then he ends up, coming and doing the battle with Dumbledore. So I think it's interesting that we also didn't hear the entire prophecy. Dumbledore tells Harry the entire prophecy in his office later after that whole scene happens. And there's a huge component where it was a boy born at the end of the summer, and it could have been Neville Longbottom. And so Harry was like, well, Voldemort just chose me and gave the powers to me. There's so much more information that we don't get we have like a quick conversation with Dumbledore and Harry post Sirius Black's death. But I don't know, I just feel like always towards the end they like try to wrap it up instead of taking another 5 minutes to really go into the meat of what the meaning is between like the whole like action sequence, you know. Also, what we didn't know that we found out in the books is that Professor Trelawney made the prophecy in the bar with Dumbledore, and Dumbledore overheard her. She was the one that made that prophecy, and then the prophecy was recorded and put into the Ministry of Magic, which I think is really important, and maybe why Dumbledore kept her around all those years, even though she wasn't the best teacher. I completely forgot to mention this. So we completely nixed the storyline of Ron and Hermione being prefects, which I think is so important, and also so isolating to Harry, which would have added to his connection with the Dark Lord. I'm kind of really upset that they didn't do that, because then there's the whole explanation of why Dumbledore didn't pick him. And it really shows like how much Dumbledore cared, and like, you know, all the mistakes that he made by not informing Harry and keeping Harry informed with everything that was going on. I feel like the connection between Dumbledore and Harry would have been stronger if, again, we had that element of him explaining why he didn't choose him as a prefect. Yeah, I want to know why they didn't add that in. I want to know. Who can tell me why they didn't keep the prefect storyline? Oh, something else that I thought was funny. Dumbledore saves Umbridge and brings her back to the hospital wing, and she's just like in shock. Which I guess you wonder, like, how did she escape the centaurs without her wand? But, you know, Dumbledore's a nice man. The other thing that we actually I don't think we hear about is that Lucius gets arrested and he goes to Azkaban for fighting at the Ministry against the Order and the kids. And then Draco is like, your father will pay. And so now here's a conversation that I want to have, and maybe this is like a J.K. Rowling question. So if Lucius shows himself to Harry as a Death Eater, and like it's confirmed that he's a Death Eater, why is Draco allowed back to Hogwarts in book 6? Like, why is he allowed back? And obviously, you know, book 6 is all about Draco and his mission. But like, if he's a known Death Eater, he shouldn't be allowed to come back to school. That's just my opinion. Especially because in the book, Dumbledore is there. He doesn't come after they fight the Death Eaters. He's there in the middle of all of that action, which he's not in the movies. So that's a question that I have for J.K. Rowling. The other devastating thing that I thought would have been really important is twofold. Sirius gave Harry, I think it is a key to open any door, which I thought would have been a nice heirloom for him to have. And also, Harry discovers a two-way mirror in which Sirius leaves a note and says, hey, anytime you need to talk to me, James and I use this to talk to each other, and Harry thinks that he can talk to Sirius, and he can't because obviously he's passed away. So I think that would have made that really like just even more heartbreaking. Obviously, I think that those two actors did a great job storytelling with that relationship. It's just these little details, like these little one lines, or even like him pulling out the letter would have just broke your heart even more. And like I said in book 3. And even book 4, they really didn't go as deep into the Sirius Harry storyline as the books do. So reading about Sirius Black's death was just even more devastating when I read it in the book. Something else that they didn't do, again, I think this has to deal with the wrap-up of the movie, but Harry really has a really hard time with Sirius's death. And he actually ends up going to Nearly Headless Nick, and he asks him why some people can come back as ghosts and others can't. And Nick basically explains that he was afraid of death, and so he kept this version of himself as a ghost so that he wouldn't really die, but he's not really alive. And most wizards don't choose that. They would just rather choose to move on into the next life. So I thought that that really showed like how scared Harry was to die and how scared of death he was, which comes full circle in book 7, which we'll talk about in book 7 if you know what I'm talking about. But I just think that they didn't include enough scenes of him mourning Sirius. He just goes back to Hogwarts and packs his bags, and we don't really see the devastation for Harry and for Daniel Radcliffe. The other thing that I thought was really funny and a good way to end the book was that all of the Order, like Professor Moody and Lupin and everybody, come to pick Harry up at the train station to talk to his aunt and uncle to tell them to treat him better, which I thought was really funny and just shows how much they care and want to protect him. But those are my thoughts about book 5. You know, I'm so grateful to reread these. It really just brings back all of the memories of reading them for the first time and all the things that we forget. And it's so easy to watch the movies, and not everybody has time to read the books. So it it's exciting for me to make these videos to just like have a discussion about all the books. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm in the middle of book 6. We're coming down now. We're going 6 and 7. We're coming down to the end of our Harry Potter series, our Harry Potter reread series, but I have lots of Harry Potter things to talk about, so don't worry. We're going to talk more about Harry Potter stuff in the future. I hope you guys like this video. Please, before you go, don't forget to subscribe because it'll really support my channel. I will see you guys when we talk about book 6, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince.